In this video I'm going to show how I make Geralts sword from the game Witcher 3. It's going to be a Larp safe sword, so this isn't just a prop cosplay sword, which means it needs to be able to take a bit of a beating. It also needs to have quite a bit of functionality, as well as being as safe as possible for when you accidentally hit your mate in the mouth in all the excitement. So it needs to be 42 inches, and I think the pommel and grip are quite important, so I kept them kind of standard size and just reduced the blade a bit. So it starts off with the template, print that out, and then stick it all together. Cut that template out of cardboard so you've got a bit more substance to it, and then use that cardboard to trace onto foam and cut 3 pieces out for the blade. It's going to be front, middle and back. And mark on the middle section where you're going to be putting the rod, and this needs to be then cut away using a very sharp knife. So my rod is going to be 10mm, same width as my foam. Cut the rod to size. Fiberglass is nasty stuff, so make sure you wear gloves and a mask to avoid those little glass particles. Remove the edges from the tip by sanding it down, and give the full length of the core a rub with some sandpaper to roughen it up and give the glue a proper purchase. I'm just covering the tip of the core with some hockey tape. This increases the bond between it, the foam and the pleather when you come to gluing it all together. Do a bit of a dry fit just to check the size. Mark on the rod where you want to glue up to. It's worth having a bit that you haven't covered in glue, just so that you can kind of hold it without getting glue all over your hands. I'm using Alpha TtcCraftworks here, but any kind of contact cement is pretty good. You apply it to both surfaces you want it to stick, and then let it dry for a few minutes. When it's touch dry, you then just press the 2 parts firmly together. So for the rod, it's a little bit tricky. You just have to make sure that you start at the end and work your way down either side. You're always going to end up with one side longer than the other. I have no idea why this happens. It won't go too crazy, but no matter what you do, it's probably going to end up with slightly one side longer than the other. Anyway, give it a good press on both sides and try and pinch the foam where it meets the core. To stop the core from damaging the foam over time, I'm sticking a little pleather rectangle each side of the core tip. You can use denim, leather, even Kevlar here, anything that's nice and tough that the core cannot penetrate. Now I'm just applying the TtcCraftworks to both sides of the central piece and either side of the front and back. While that dries, I'm just going to demold my attempt at a pommel here. So I had a few disasters making this pommel out of foam, but essentially I printed it, then molded it in silicone and cast it in the foam. I will share a video down the line on how I do this, but I'll probably do it with something else, so you don't just have to watch a 10-minute video of me making catastrophic mistakes. Once the glues touch dry, you then give them a nice firm press and a good roll with the rolling pin to kind of make sure those 2 surfaces are firmly pressed together, and then do the other side. Again, be careful here just so you're lining things up as best you can by eye, and then give it a really good roll with the rolling pin, or just press it with your hand, or roll an empty wine bottle or something over it just to give it a good press. Pressure helps activate the contact cement. Then I'm going to trim down the blade a little because I want to make sure that the handle is all there along with the pommel, which is actually quite long, so I'm just checking my size here. I need to keep everything under 42 inches, which means I have to cut a little bit of the handle off for the time being, and then reduce the size of the blade from the bottom. Find the center of the blade and draw a line down it. And then using a sharp blade along either side to remove a load of the foam before moving on to the sanding. And here you want to really take your time and just start by working the edges of the foam where the 3 pieces meet, just to get them in line with each other and get rid of any hangy bits. Then you want to work your way along the full length of each surface. In total there's going to be 4 surfaces to this blade. Each side has 2 angles, and while you're doing it you want to try and work down the whole length of the blade. The tip is going to need a little bit more work, so you need to just do everything by eye, but take your time just to work it down. Keep checking as you go. Once I'm happy with the blade's shape, I go over it by hand with some high grit sandpaper, which gives it a nice smooth finish. Check the size and overall look of the blade against the original template. Make sure it's within the requirements of your Larp safety regs, and then I'm going to make a start on the grip. To make the grip, I'm going to use a wrapping technique that I picked up from TtcCraftworks. Cut the foam the length you need and apply the contact cement onto both sides of it. Apply the contact cement to the core and then affix one end of the foam. Using the edge of the workbench, wrap the foam tightly around the core until you're happy with the thickness, and then cut off the excess. This can then be sanded to the desired finish. I'm cutting the end so it's nice and flat in order to attach the pommel. Now for the guard. I'm going back to the original template and cutting this out of cardboard to check the size against the foam blade. I've removed foam from the front and back side of the base of the blade to make sure there is a nice flat surface for the guard to slot into. Once I'm happy with the size, I cut 2 guards out of the foam and apply the contact cement to the areas on the blade and then both sides of the guard. I didn't film it, but I sanded the grip to the shape I wanted and wrapped it in hockey tape to make it nice and tight, as this area is going to be handled a lot, so you don't want the foam coming away from the core. Whilst the glue becomes touch dry, I cut a few strips of foam out and applied the TtcCraftworks to it. These strips will be stuck to the grip at the top, middle and bottom to add a bit of detail. When sticking the guard, it's very important to get this in line with the blade. If this is off center, it will be very noticeable. So this is another benefit to cutting the outer section of the blade away so the guard can slot in and be flat against the core. Once aligned, give it a really good press and pinch it where the sides meet to activate the cement. Now I'm going to apply some details to the grip in the form of rings where the grip meets the guard and pommel, as well as the middle of the grip. This is simply done by wrapping a few strips of foam around itself and cutting off the excess. So the pommel I'm really trying to line up here with the guards there on the edges of the blade so that it's central. Take your time when applying this, and then once you're happy, give it a really good push. And squeeze while you're pushing as well, and this helps activate the glue and bind those two areas together. I'm going to use a strip of foam, 1mm foam here, just around where the pommel and grip meet. This will secure the two together, so hopefully it doesn't come off during an event. There you go, it's how it looks so far. I'm really happy with that. I think that's kind of a main detail of this blade. Happy with the length, it's still under 42 inches, which is good. Now I'm just going with the Dremel on the guard just to remove those areas where it joins and go around the edges a bit as well. I'd like to keep them a bit quite angular still, but just softens the edges a little to make it so that you get rid of that foam look. Now I'm using a hot iron to carve some detail into the pommel where the pommel meets the grip. Just some diagonal lines here, it just adds a bit of detail to the grip here. Then again, using the thinned TtcCraftworks, you apply this all over the sword to act as a kind of primer between the foam and the latex. This just helps with the latex grip. I applied the first layer with my spray gun before it jammed. In the last video I mentioned that it got jammed and backfired. I haven't fixed it since, but then I go back to the old trusty sponge and latex technique, where I'm just applying each layer of latex with the sponge to avoid those paintbrush lines. I'm doing 5 or 6 coats here. I think I do 6 or 7 coats on this blade. It's just a case of making sure that you're covering all the areas and you're not applying too much at once, and you don't want it adding too much texture. Let that dry overnight, and now it's time to paint. I'm going to use flexi paint on this, the silver and the gunmetal. For the guard and pommel, I'm using a gunmetal, and for the blade itself, I'm going to use silver as the base, because obviously this is a silver sword. Water that down and apply with a brush or a sponge, however you want to apply it. You want to make sure that you're not applying this too thick, and you're going to be doing lots of layers again, same as the latex. So this is layer 2. I've done 3 layers on the guard and pommel already. Layer 3 now on the blade. Stippling it this time to try and avoid those streaky lines. Give it a bit of variety when it dries. And that's what it's looking like so far. So there's the pommel there, the grip, in the gunmetal. And now I'm applying a matte finish on the entire thing. I haven't finished the painting just yet, but I want to stop the flexi paint dries tacky. I want to remove that tack before I move on to the next stage of the painting, which is going to be using my rub and buff. I'm just going to apply some masking tape on the blade here. This is something I'm just going to try out for the first time, just so the rub and buffer goes on the edges only, like it's a sharp edge. Because rub and buff's particularly shiny. And I'm applying silver rub and buff to the edges, and then a gunmetal rub and buff to the kind of fuller of the blade, just to give it a bit of variety on the blade, so it looks a bit more interesting than just one plain color. Now removing the masking tape and just giving it a bit of a rub with my finger just to blend it a bit more with the silver that's already there. I'm going to use a cloth as well. Here you go, you can see it looking nice and shiny like a silver blade ish with a sharp edge. I'm applying some isopropyl alcohol to a cloth and giving it a very gentle rub with this cloth here. I'm not applying too much pressure at all. I just want to soften where the rub and buff meets the flexi paint. And yeah, that's kind of it for the silver. Now I'm applying some simply watered down black acrylic with a sponge to the lower half of the blade, just to again add some weathering, some use. And I'm rubbing most of that away with this cloth as well. So it's just a tiny bit of detail that just adds a bit of variety to the blade itself. Bit of a whack test here. It's not going to be proper whack safe until I've done the final Isoflex layer. I probably should not be wearing a short sleeve top using Isoflex. If you get any of it on your skin, that's very bad. So do not wear a short sleeve top like I am in this video. Definitely wear a mask. Use a fan if you have one. Use an extractor fan as well if you have one. I've got my fans on. I've got my gloves on, I've got my mask on, and it's still, you need to be very careful with the Isoflex. It's nasty stuff. Definitely try and use this outside if possible, and still wear a mask and gloves. Anyway, you apply this all over the blade, and the guard, and the handle, and the pommel, and it creates a nice, strong, flexible seal over the entire weapon. Don't lay it on too thick. If you lay it on too thick, it can discolor your blade a little and go a bit yellow. But otherwise, if it's nice and thin over the whole surface, it just adds a very good layer of protection. Then you want to let that dry for a good 24 hours. It gets a bit tacky after 2 hours, and then after a good 24 hours, it's not as tacky, but it's still slightly tacky. So you can either do a gloss finish or a matte finish. To get a gloss finish, you just use silicone spray. I'll add a link in the description for the silicone spray that I'm using here in the UK. Spray that over the surface, and then give it a very, very gentle wipe down with a cloth just to remove any excess, but it protects the Isoflex there. And this is the same way that you treat it over time. Or clean it up and then give it a little spray with the sealant, the silicone sealant, to protect the latex and make your blades last a lot longer. I'm now using a bit of talcum powder on the pommel and the grip and guard, and this just removes some of the shine from that part of the blade and helps accentuate the shine on the blade itself rather than the entire item. But yeah, happy with that. And now to move on to the grip. So to do the grip, I'm going to use cord here. I think this is just cord for using macrame, whatever the hell it's called. It's just cord. You can get it from your hobby shop. I'll put a link in the description to the one I've used. But you basically just wrap it. I'll share a link to a video where someone explains this a lot better than I'm going to. So you basically, what I'm doing is I'm just taping the cord to the grip and then wrapping around it. Once you get to the top, I am using a brush with a hole in the end of it, and basically I'm going to continue wrapping around the brush, and then I'm going to thread the cord through the brush and then pull the brush through where I've wrapped it, and that means that I should be able to kind of pull it tight and it kind of holds itself in place. Anyway, kind of worked, but yeah, you can see where it's kind of holding itself and stopping itself from coming and stuff. What I want to do is just add a finish to this grip though. I'm using a little bit of pleather here, black pleather in strips, and I'm just going to apply this to where the cord meets the metal parts, just to give it a bit of again on the grip, a bit of detail. It's not necessary, but it's just something to add a bit of detail. Cut off the excess, and Geralts Silver Sword is done. I'm pretty happy how this came out. I'm really happy how the kind of silver looks actually, and the pommel came out beautifully. The foam pommel. That's going to be safe. It's going to be strong, and it's going to be durable. Yeah, so I'm really happy how this came out. Geralt Silver Sword, first of many. I'm going to be building a lot of these swords and a lot of other swords. So let me know what you want to see me try next, and yeah, I'm going to make a Larp safe version of it. Or if anyone else has any questions, drop them in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more content like this. Cheers.